I know, right? This isn't a One Piece video, I'm expanding my taste. Last year I finally decided to see what the crazy noise was all about by watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. In that time, I have fallen madly in love. The stories are epic and unique, the battles are spectacular, and of course, what holds it all together are the characters. What's awesome about JoJo is that like 90% of the cast in a story that literally spans decades are all likable characters. So much so that any character can be anyone's favorite. We of course have the stereotypical favorites, but I thought it'd be fun to throw my hat in the ring. I'll try to be as brief as I can since these characters would not only take essays to accurately sum up everything about their lives, but the last time I promised to be brief, I ended up making a 43-minute long video. I don't need to do that again. Just to let you know, I have not read JoJo as of yet, so don't expect anyone from that part to make the list. All that being said, let's get started. These are my personal favorite JoJo characters in no particular order, except for number 1, of course. I honestly think out of all the Joestars, Jonathan gets the least respect. It's really odd because out of all the Joestars, he's practically the Captain America of the group. Always honorable and will without a doubt be the nicest guy in the room, but has no problem kicking ass just because it's the right thing to do. Not once has Jonathan shrunk in terror. He always met every obstacle head on and wanted to live the gentleman's life. Of course, the best part about Jonathan was that he was the polar opposite of Dio. For their entire lives, Jonathan has always been underneath his so-called brother. He's been humiliated, ousted, emotionally tortured for most of his young life, but when Jonathan finally makes his stand, he becomes the unbreakable wall to Dio's unstoppable force. So much so that Dio, a being that has lived far beyond any human, has gained powers many can only dream of, can do nothing but respect Jonathan for being the best of humanity. Hell, I'm willing to bet that Dio thought that Jonathan was the only good human. That sums up Jonathan pretty well for me. He's just the symbol of good and humanity at its best. In a manga world full of tough young guys with attitude, it's refreshing to see a main character be like this. The only one I can think of that's as respectable as Jonathan is Kenshin. And it may be easy to give Jonathan bonus points because of his death scene, but I will defend my claim that his death is one of the best deaths ever. Tragic but befitting Jonathan because of who he is, or in the world of JoJo, who he was. Jonathan is the stone that the house of JoJo was built on. Is he the most powerful? No. Is he the smartest? No. Does he have magic breath powers? Abso-goddamn-lutely. He's just a man trying to do the right thing, and sometimes that's all I need from a character. January 5th, 1996. An officer named Bryant Peeney was shot and killed in the line of duty when he tried to stop a suspect on the run. He was a man that all officers should be like, both in the past and present, willing to risk their lives to make his home, the world even, a better place. Bryant Peeney was my cousin. And even though I was only 4 when he was killed, I still hear stories about him from my family to this day. I look up to him, and whenever I see an officer commit a crime like us Americans often see in this age, I get disappointed. Why should the police institution suffer people like this when my family gave his life to defend it, to honor it? All I could do now is follow in his footsteps, just trying to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Now you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Well, if you're caught up on part 5 of the story, this might start to sound similar to a certain character's backstory. Leon Abbacchio, member of the Passion gang, was a former cop. He was like any cop that started out, optimistic that they could change the lives of those around them in a positive way. However, Abbacchio noticed that the city he was in was run by crime. Officers around him and even the general public hated goody two-shoe officers because they don't want their lives affected in this era of crime and profit. Soon enough, Abbacchio was swallowed by the crime. In fact, he was involved in one indirectly. He made a call that in his mind sounded like the only logical thing to do. but that choice led to the death of his partner, a man who in my eyes was very much like Officer Bryant. A man trying to do the right thing but paid with it for his life. When I first read part 5, I connected with Abbacchio. He wanted to do the right thing, but this one death changed him forever. He grew more bitter towards the world, often closing his heart off to everyone except Bucciarati. In many regards, Bucciarati was Abbaccio's new partner. It just happened to be in a gang. And when Giorno Giovanna entered the picture, Abbacchio was judgmental with extreme prejudice. Now, even though his role in Part 5 was to be Giorno's voice of doubt and to be a conflict in the main group, you could still see hints of Officer Abbacchio from time to time. In fact, that hint of goodness when he helped kids instead of focusing on his mission to get the boss's identity cost him his life. The same circumstances as the officers I mentioned before. At least Abbacchio was able to leave one last message for his team, and that ultimately led to the boss's defeat. Putting Abbacchio on this list is strange since he's not the most involved member of the team. He's often a source of negativity, but it's the connection to the character that makes me see him as more than a character. I see him as a reflection at times. Just like with Jonathan, he ultimately paid with his life to do the right thing, and whenever I think of Part 5, I think of Abbacchio first. At least he got to see his partner and have one last smile before sending. Josuke is without a doubt my favorite Joestar. I like to think it's because he's this mix of all the other Joestars so far. He can be as noble as Jonathan, as smart as Joseph, and as tough as Jotaro. It also helps that Crazy Diamond is my favorite stand in the series. The ability to restructure or restore anything and using that ability to win fights was mind-blowing to me when I first saw Part 4. So the personality and stand power were my favorite so far, and the way Josuke acts like a real teenager and how he interacts with people is fantastic in my opinion. His ability to make friends and to tackle a very difficult relationship with an absent father figure is something that I didn't see that much in JoJo's prior. The heart of Josuke, the motivation to be a better person that lives his own life along with the power to be a threat to practically anyone is admiring. I also like how small Josuke seems throughout the part. I will forever love parts 1 through 3 since the Joestars had this grand scale of destiny, but in part 4, Josuke is, like I said, just a kid. But of course, thanks to the essence of stands, he ends up saving his town from one of the deadliest and greatest villains in manga history. There, I said it. This small scale take on destiny makes Josuke all the more relatable, grounded, and in some ways more fun than the main cast of JoJo's. The closest I can come to an analogy is that the first 3 Joestars are like Thor in the first 2 Avengers films, grand, powerful, and can steal the show at times. But come Thor Ragnarok, aka Josuke, where you just let the character explode in life, perfection. He may not be the strongest guy around, his genius hails from his absent father, but I will always prefer Josuke when it comes to the best of the best in the Joestar bloodline. You know what? Fuck the heroes. Let's talk villains in JoJo. Out of the literal Sinister Six, everyone, except Pucci, could deserve a spot on my favorites list. Valentine has insane levels of belief and determination, Diavolo is a terrifying force whose brutality is as strong as his selfishness, Kira was, like I said, fantastic, and Cars is one of the most unique villains or characters I've seen. But you all know who I'm picking. There's a reason I can't shut up about the first few parts of JoJo, about how grand it is and how important Jonathan was because of this one relationship with his mortal enemy. His charisma knows no bounds, both in the world of JoJo and in real life. He's without a doubt the greatest manga villain I've experienced. It is the vampire stand-wielding one-time god of reality, Dio. What do I say? What even needs to be said? I could talk about how Dio from episode 1 was basically Satan in human form, a master manipulator that has no empathy for life, driven by the worst parts of humanity and seeks greater power. I could mention that once he becomes a vampire, his cruelty still haunts me to this day. How even in defeat, this seemingly immortal power shows humility and yet has just as much determination. I thought in part 2 that nothing could surprise me after Cars lost. But then the fucking coffin rose out of the ocean and I forgot part 2 was a thing. I was suddenly taken aback in fear and so much hype. And even though part 3 has its issues, I will forever stand by the fact that when Dio enters the fight, he makes part 3 worth it, and one of my favorite fights of all time. The grand reveal of the world's power, the terror Dio brought, how he brought millions of readers and watchers to their knees in his final round against Jotaro. Do you want to know how I feel about Jotaro versus Dio? The goddamn road roller scene gets me as hyped as I was when I first saw Endgame. The flow of emotions that I get from, as I said before, this unstoppable force just pushes me on edge every time. I truly feel that Dio is the end of the world. Behind him are the lives lost in Phantom Blood, Battle Tendency, and of course, Stardust Crusaders. All the emotions and sheer power are behind Dio and his stand. I could keep hyping myself over this until I pass out, but all of you know what Dio is about, what his impact had for storytellers and fans for decades to come. He is fantastic, and easily my favorite villain in not only this story, but just about in any story. Praise you, Lord Dio. While Dio will be my favorite villain in the JoJo bunch, Gyro Zeppeli will always be my favorite character in general. Like with Josuke, this is a more grounded take on the Zeppeli bloodline. Gyro used to be a medical expert and executioner in training, and it turns out they both have their own set code. You're not allowed to question your role, and your job must command respect. Gyro was on the road to that, until he noticed a boy that was sentenced to death only because he was a servant to a criminal. Gyro went against his father and the kingdom for that matter, but there was a way to save the boy. It was pretty much paying his bail, and the only way to do that would be for Gyro to enter and win the Steel Ball Run. It was there where he would meet and befriend Johnny Joestar. Together they make a pretty good team. But what makes Gyro my favorite is that he grew the most out of anyone I can think of in the world of JoJo. The first part of Steel Ball Run makes Gyro the main character, showing us one of my favorite powers ever, the spin. How he applies this in battle, philosophy, and even healing is so goddamn cool. Never did I think that spinning could be turned into something badass. Anyway, Gyro was determined to save this little boy's life, and he's proved that he can take on practically anyone to do so. But his character feels incomplete. He needed to fight someone that would be the gateway to manhood and his final development as a character. Enter Ringo teaching Gyro the true man's world. Jotaro vs Dio will be my favorite battle in JoJo, but Gyro vs Ringo is a close second. Gyro evolves in this fight against a man that can rewind time in 6-second intervals. Only someone that has the fullest intent to kill can best Ringo. And in this fight, Gyro learns that and corners Ringo in the ultimate stalemate. It's so awesome and fulfilling to see Gyro pull out ahead against someone that was practically unstoppable. Now after this battle, the main character role was reversed. Johnny had to evolve, but he still had Gyro and his admirable balls by his side. I love the bond between Johnny and Gyro. They joke, sing, and act like brothers in a short course of time. But everything goes to hell when Johnny and Gyro have to face off against the goddamn President of the United States. The universal law in JoJo is that the Zeppeli family always have to die early. Gyro was no exception. However, like the Zeppeli before him in the original timeline, Gyro accepted his death by not only meeting it head on, but giving his Joestar companion the tools needed to finally win, resulting in one of my favorite defeats in JOJO. You know how the best Western films can hit you on an emotional level? That's pretty much Gyro Zeppeli for me. No other character had my attention this much, and everything he was and what he did resonated. A unique charm for a JOJO character and plenty of skill, Gyro spun his way into my heart. I know that sounds lame, but let me have this one! And those were my favorite characters from JoJo's Bizarre Adventures so far. Maybe part 8 can change my mind, or hell, part 9 if that ever happens. But regardless, I love this story and its characters, and I cannot wait to talk more about this series in the future. What are your favorite characters? Let me know down below, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see all of you legends next time. Take care.